Welcome to Principles of Ecology. Today, we are going to explore a fascinating and deeply important topic: biosphere reserves. As students of zoology, you already know that protecting wildlife is crucial. But have you ever wondered how we can protect nature without displacing the human beings who have lived alongside it for centuries? This is one of the greatest challenges in modern conservation. In this lecture, we will discover how biosphere reserves offer a brilliant solution to this problem, balancing the needs of vulnerable ecosystems with sustainable human development. Let us dive in and see how this balance is achieved. To understand how a biosphere reserve works, I want you to imagine a grand, ancient castle designed to protect a royal family. The innermost room of this castle is heavily guarded and completely restricted, ensuring absolute safety for the most vulnerable people. Surrounding this room is a courtyard where guards and trusted staff move about carefully. Finally, outside the castle walls are the bustling farmlands where everyday people live and work. A biosphere reserve operates exactly like this castle. But instead of protecting royalty, it protects our planet's most precious ecosystems and wildlife. It creates different layers of protection, allowing wild animals to thrive in the center while humans live and work in the outer layers. Now that we have a mental picture of the castle, let us look at the formal ecological definition. A biosphere reserve is an internationally recognized protected area. These areas are specifically designated by UNESCO under its Man and the Biosphere program, often referred to as the MAB program. Unlike traditional national parks that strictly prohibit human interference, a biosphere reserve has a very different goal. It is specifically designed to reconcile the conservation of biodiversity with sustainable human development. To achieve this delicate and beautiful balance, the reserve is legally divided into three distinct functional zones, much like the layers of our castle. Let us examine the first and most critical layer, which corresponds to the innermost room of our castle. This is called the core zone. The core zone is strictly protected for the conservation of landscapes, ecosystems, and species. In this central region, absolutely zero human interference is allowed. You will not find any farming, tourism, or settlements here. The only human activity permitted is non-destructive scientific research, which helps ecologists monitor the health of the environment without disturbing it. This strict isolation ensures that the most vulnerable plants and animals have a safe haven to breed and thrive naturally. Moving outward from the center, we enter the second layer, known as the buffer zone. Think of this as the castle courtyard. The buffer zone completely surrounds the core and acts as a physical shield. While the core is strictly off-limits, the buffer zone allows for limited, low-impact human activities. Here, you might find guided ecotourism, environmental education programs, and more extensive scientific research. The primary purpose of this zone is to absorb any external shocks or human impacts, ensuring that the pristine core remains completely undisturbed by the outside world. Finally, we reach the outermost layer, called the transition zone. This is equivalent to the bustling farmlands outside the castle walls. The transition zone is where local communities actually live, farm, and work. However, the activities here are not destructive. They are focused on sustainable agriculture and responsible resource management. People living in this zone work in harmony with nature, utilizing the land in ways that do not deplete its resources. This zone is the ultimate proof that human economic development and environmental conservation can coexist peacefully within the same shared landscape. Let us take a moment to visualize everything we just discussed. On your screen is a standard zoning diagram for a biosphere reserve. Notice the three concentric circles. Right in the center is the core zone, dedicated entirely to wildlife and pristine nature. Wrapping around it is the buffer zone, where you see icons for research and gentle tourism. Finally, the large outermost ring is the transition zone, filled with human settlements and sustainable agriculture. This spatial design is the secret to the reserve's success. The outer layers physically absorb human impact, creating a safe, insulated sanctuary in the very middle. Looking at that diagram, you might wonder why we need biosphere reserves when we already have national parks. The reality is that millions of indigenous people and local communities live in or near forests. Simply kicking them out to create a fenced-off park causes immense social conflict and poverty. Biosphere reserves solve this problem by treating humans as an integral part of the ecosystem, rather than an enemy to be removed. They serve as living laboratories where scientists and locals work together to test sustainable farming and forestry. Without these reserves, we would lose vital genetic diversity, and local communities would lose their traditional livelihoods. Now that we understand the philosophy behind these zones, let us look at how ecologists physically structure them using spatial area models. The total area of the reserve must be large enough to support top predators, while the outer zones must be proportional to absorb human impact. We represent this using a simple mathematical relationship. The formula states that A total equals A core plus A buffer plus A transition. Here, A total is the entire geographical area of the reserve, usually measured in square kilometers. A core is the strictly protected center. A buffer is the middle zone, and A transition is the outermost human settlement area. If a government increases the human settlement area, the total area must increase, or the protected zones will shrink, threatening wildlife. Beyond just the total size, conservation managers need to know if the core is adequately shielded from the outside world. To determine this, they use the buffer-to-core protection ratio. The formula is RP equals A buffer divided by A core. In this equation, RP represents the protection ratio, which is a dimensionless number. The numerator, A buffer, is the area of the buffer zone, and the denominator, A core, is the area of the core zone. This formula tells us exactly how much buffering space exists for every single square kilometer of strictly protected core habitat. It is a crucial metric for evaluating the safety of the wildlife inside. Let us think about what changes physically when this ratio increases or decreases. If the value of RP increases, it means the buffer zone is growing relative to the core. This creates a thicker protective layer around the center, which significantly decreases the likelihood of human-wildlife conflict and harmful edge effects. Conversely, if RP is very small, it means the buffer is thin. A thin buffer leaves the core highly exposed to the transition zone. When this happens, pollution, noise, and even poaching from the human settlements can easily spill over into the pristine habitat, putting the entire ecosystem at risk. Before we conclude, let us see this with a concrete example. A conservation team is designing the Green Canopy Biosphere Reserve. We are given a core area of 500 square kilometers and a transition zone of 1,200 square kilometers. The problem states the buffer must be 1.5 times the size of the core. First, we calculate the buffer area by multiplying 1.5 by 500, giving us 750 square kilometers. Next, we find the total area by adding the core, buffer, and transition zones together, which equals 2,450 square kilometers. Finally, we calculate the protection ratio by dividing the buffer area of 750 by the core area of 500. The final answer is a ratio of 1.5. Because this is greater than 1, it physically means the core is very well shielded from human activities. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us reinforce the most important ideas. First, biosphere reserves represent a modern, inclusive approach to conservation that balances protecting biodiversity with sustainable human development. Second, this is achieved by dividing the landscape into core, buffer, and transition zones, ensuring that nature and humanity are treated as partners, not enemies. Finally, we learned that mathematical tools, like the protection ratio, help managers guarantee that this zoning actually works in the real world. You now understand the fundamental principles of how we can live in harmony with the Earth, preserving its wonders for future generations. Great job today.